Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our fourth Let's Talk About webinar. I'm Shwan Smith, Lead for Diversity and Inclusion at KTN, and it's my honour to introduce our host for today's webinar, Sonia Barlow. Sonia is an award-winning entrepreneur, founder of the LMF Network, diversity business coach, and motivational speaker. She's delivered 2 TEDx talks, a handful of European keynotes, 210 skills-based workshops, and had her business-based articles published in Metro newspaper and Sifted EU. She's also partnered with global companies such as Google, Santander, Vodafone, Oxford University, the Institute of Coding, Barclays, and many more. In 2020, she was named as one of the most influential women in tech, winner of the Women in Software Changemakers and Top 50 BAME Entrepreneurs. In 2021, Sonia will be a published author, sharing her debut handbook on entrepreneurship, business, and becoming your own boss. I met Sonia a year and a half ago at a workshop and networking event. She was one of the most memorable people I have ever met. And a year on, we finally started to collaborate on a few projects. She's the perfect person to host today's conversation, and alongside our panelists, we'll be discussing how to meet the right people. So over to you, Sonia.
Thank you so much. I do think that when I'm introduced in such a kind manner that sometimes I have to take a step out and think, are you actually talking about me? Because being a 2015 grad, the younger Sonia would never believe that I'd be able to kind of jump on Zoom and lead such a session and have such accolades. So thank you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with introduction of the panelists, and then we're going to kick off and go into questions. If you're watching this, please do ask questions via the chat link and get yourself involved. So our first panelist is Sarah Porter. Sarah is the founder and CEO of Inspired Minds, a global group active in 162 countries worldwide that specializes in AI for good. IM represents 52,000 people from a multidisciplinary background and has a community which has achieved a number of groundbreaking initiatives. In her role as founder, she has grown a worldwide community of 52,000 game changers, including the support of the UN, EU Parliament, NHS, and many more. Most importantly, in 2020, she will launch a worldwide initiative, which I will let her talk more about as we go on. Sarah is also mom to 3 kids, aged between 7 and 14, and she believes that the world has to fundamentally pivot from its current trajectory if we are to leave future generations with anything reminiscent of the current world. There's so much to unpack there, and we will get to that. Jonathan Abra has worked as a knowledge transfer manager at KTN for more than 10 years, specializing in water, energy, and environmental space. Before that, he worked in environmental consulting and the mineral industry. An introvert by nature, he has learnt networking by doing. He has an MBA from Lancaster University Management School, once starred as an extra in a film, and is a qualified coach in 3 different sports. He is also our token white man today. And that's really important because we'll get into that. We'll see how he feels to be a minority and if that makes him deviate, disrupt, or become closer to the networker that we want to become. And lastly, but not least, we have Alicia Essen. Alicia is the founder and CEO of NX Steps Group, an IoT-enabled wearable healthcare solution company using biomechanics to keep people injury-free while maximizing performance. Previously, she was a product lead for Doctora Health, Nigeria's first patient-centered healthcare platform that aggregates capacity in existing medical facilities. Her background, she holds an MSc in the Brunel University, London. She has worked on national and international projects in industries ranging from healthcare, HR to business entrepreneurship. She believes that STEAM education and having an understanding of entrepreneurship is pivotal for the next generation, especially for people living in developing countries. Core to what drives her is finding impactful solutions to problems that affect people's everyday quality of life. Now let's talk about meeting the right people. Siobhan kindly mentioned that we met about 18 months ago or so forth. I was working in a extremely toxic workplace. It had broken my confidence, and I went into a free breakfast event which was run by Google for Startups. Now I have to admit, a part of why I went is because I wasn't really employed at that point, and free breakfast always sounds cool. It was about half an hour walk, so I was like, yep, great, I'll get there. And it was about diversity inclusion. It was about VR, it's about tech. And I remember at some point I probably not necessarily broke down, but started feeling comfortable enough to share my story. I absolutely love to network. But I have to admit that when I started networking, I was under the impression that you have 30 seconds to sell yourself. And so I would speak uncontrollably, just trying to fit everything in. I would start sweating because I thought, right, what about the fact that maybe someone may reject me and they may not want to connect with me? And I would randomly walk up to people who I thought could help me enter an opportunity or open a door for me. Because personally, that's what networking used to be as a university student. Today, networking for me is about community building. It's about exploring opportunities. And it's not about, hey, what can you do for me? But more, what can I do for you? How can I support you in your ambitions, in your future, in your life? And make sure that we can fundamentally support each other and the future generations, as many of our panelists have spoken about already. In 2018, I found myself extremely lonely and I didn't have a network. So I started a brunch club. That brunch club itself, ironically, no one showed up to brunch. So that didn't actually work. But what I realized was I was so low that I wasn't going to make a difference if I carried on or not. And so I did. Today, that brunch club is now a social enterprise, encouraging you to show up as your best self. Fundamentally, that's because I've been in workplaces where I couldn't be my best self. I didn't have a network. I didn't have friends, and I definitely didn't have a community. Today, it is through networking. It is through being able to share my story. And most importantly, it's through getting networking wrong a lot of the time, which has helped me to identify myself, the opportunities which I do want to say yes to, the things which I want to say no to, and most importantly, what I should say in my introduction. So if I could leave you with one thing, it's think about the 5 things that you want to be known for in the next 18 months, next 2 years. Work backwards. Enter opportunities and workplaces which align with those 5. Use workshops online, workshops offline to introduce yourself. And the 5 things that you should always share, online or offline, is your name, why you're at this event or what you'd like to get from it, what your passion areas may be, how you can help someone else, and your LinkedIn URL or your social media handles. I'm going to invite the panelists into this conversation. I'm extremely excited to hear everyone's perspective and bring a bit of reality into this concept, which is networking. So if I start in the order as to how I introduce the panelists with our first question, what is your definition of networking? So Sarah, I'll kick up with yourself.
So thanks for that introduction and thanks for having me here. So my definition of networking is, my personal definition is, oh my God, this is utter hell. The idea of having to walk into a room used to fill me with complete and utter fear. And it's something that I would avoid at all costs. And in the job that I was in, which was head of mergers and acquisitions for a large business, I had to network. And it was something that I would physically dread. I had moments where I would be in toilets beforehand, quite literally, as you said, sweating, palpitations. I tried the standing in front of the mirror, doing the power posing and all this sort of stuff to get my confidence up. So it's something that I really, really hated. And I think that for me changed when I started my own business. And when you start your own business and you're so passionate about something that you really genuinely feel that you have to go out there and you as a startup, you have to start to make new contacts, you have to build a community around you. And my mindset changed very much to, this is actually not something to be fearful of, because I'm not trying to sell people something. It's a give, ask opportunity, which I think is how Gary, I always pronounce his last name wrong, Gary Vaynerchuk calls it, which is where you have to approach things with, actually, I'm really curious and interested in these people. This is a network of people that I have something that I can offer, and how can I help them? And if you approach it with curiosity, for me, networking is about building your tribe of like-minded people around you. So I guess that's pretty much my definition now of what networking means to me.
Yeah, that's amazing. And what I really want to point out there is the fact that your definition has transformed as you have in your identity in your workplace and most importantly, how you feel about yourself. And that's a really key point that for those who are listening to take away is what you may feel about networking even yesterday is not what you're going to feel about it tomorrow, as long as you shift your mindset. So thank you for sharing that. Jonathan, yourself?
How to follow. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, similarly to Sarah, I think I started out absolutely detesting networking. I think you said in your intro, because I penned it, that I am an introvert by nature, and worked in a very technical sphere to begin with. But even so, networking is great because otherwise you're just learning your trade through Google, or in the old days, journals. And so I look upon it as sense checking, filling in the gaps, bouncing ideas off other people, and sort of grounding yourself in reality. So as things have developed in my career, yes, I've got a little bit better at using the tech. So I have LinkedIn, and you put your handle on your name there, and I must do the same. And similarly, you know, I'm working with Twitter, and I guess the phrase curating your own brand is sort of the encapsulation, because we are no longer tied to one organization for the duration of our careers. People move rapidly, and so you need to take with you your connections. So I think that's what networking is about.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Alicia, yourself?
I think I'm going to echo all of you in just saying, and especially what you said about networking changing from yesterday to today in terms of your mindset. I think over my lifetime, networking and my idea of networking has definitely changed. I had the same mindset as you when I was a student. You know, it was very transactional. You'd go, you'd meet somebody, you'd swap business cards, and you know, you'd want to know what they can do for you. And as Sarah mentioned, when you're running your business, you do start to think of networking differently. And as an introvert, even though, as I mentioned, a lot of people probably think I'm more of an extrovert than I am, I see networking as relationship building. I think that I've gone from the idea that networking is a transactional affair to the idea that, in fact, what I'm doing is I'm bringing these people into my circle, and I want to make sure that we as people align on things like principles and ethics, or even just being able to respect each other and treat each other kindly, I think is really important. So as to end is just to say, my mindset about networking is constantly shifting, and I imagine it will continue to do so.
I love that. So, you know, there's a lot of similarities. So we've said building our tribe, offering help, sense checking, curating your brand, and building your relationship, which is great to see the shift. And exactly, you know, echoing how you've ended. Before, networking used to be transactional. Today, networking is necessary. It's necessary to build the life that you want and to really curate the future, especially when we consider that we are working for like 50, 60 odd years at some point. You know, retirement age is getting higher. A lot of opportunities are coming through your networks, coming through your online channels. And if anything, COVID has taught us that if it isn't for your network, then possibly your opportunities wouldn't necessarily be there in the same capacity that they would have beforehand. I mean, the stats are something ridiculous, like 80% of your opportunities come through your network, and 83% of referrals or recommendations still come from word of mouth. I know that when we started this year, so I was one of those people that at the end of 2019, I was like, right, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to start my business. 2020, I was hyped. March was a great month. And then COVID hit. So then the weekend of COVID, I was meant to be in Amsterdam delivering a workshop. 75% of my income wiped out in March. In April, I had no money. In May, I had no money. And to go from, oh, I'm going to be a successful business owner to what has just happened overnight, well, actually, most of the world was feeling that. In May, I started a podcast. In June, I reached out to my network and I said, look, I'm having a terrible time. I'm not getting any business. I don't have any income. Do you have any opportunities for me? And things started getting better. And my point being is sometimes you have to be vulnerable and you have to be open to say, I just need some help. Where can you help me? In July, I mentioned to actually someone I'd met via a network and on the internet a couple of months ago that I'm really interested in writing a book. She actually introduced me to a publishing agent that she knew. In August, I signed a book deal. By September, I'd not only made up my income, but founded new opportunities. And a lot of that is through the fact that you're vocal about what you're looking for and equally what isn't going right for you. And I found that was really important in both using your network to build your brand, but also using your network to find your own sense of self again. So my question to you is, fundamentally, how has it actually helped you in the past? You know, both I want success stories, but I also want even stories of where it hasn't gone that well, but you've made something great out of it. So we're going to go in reverse order just to kind of spice things up. Alicia, would you like to start?
Yes. So how's networking helped me? I think for me, networking has been absolutely invaluable. And that's not just individual networking, but being in the right networks as well. I mean, last year I was, my business and considering, is this really going to work? Am I really going to do well? And just by being in the right network and by being in that network, I managed to meet some amazing people who not just showed kindness and gave their time. And that was very important to me. And, a lot of it wasn't I asked for their time. A lot of it was just people being good people. But what that showed me, because I think I had a very different idea before that, what that showed me was that it gave me a sense of who I was as well. So it showed me who I appeared to be to other people, and perhaps who I thought, who I keep down talking in my head, perhaps is not who I am actually. And so that was a really positive impact for me. And so for the last year's period, I think network has been more than invaluable to me, and I can't, say how important enough it is.
Thank you so much. And, it's through our networks that even we're having this discussion together and that we're able to share the success story. So thank you so much for joining and for sharing that insight. Jonathan, what about yourself?
It's interesting. I haven't really considered the personal dimension to this. So for me, working for KTN, networking is what I do. It's my job. It's my purpose, if you like. And so in order to do that job properly, I have to network, which is why I've had to work at it. And there's a phrase that we use in KTN, which is a curated serendipity. So I liken it to kissing lots of frogs before you find the prince. You've got to get out there, and you don't know who the important people are going to be until you talk to them. So approach every meeting as though this person is going to change your life, or you're going to be able to change theirs. A couple of examples, perhaps. I worked with a company that was developing a new turbocharger for motorsport, and they were having real trouble getting this thing to market. But I knew somebody else who worked in the water sector that was looking for a more efficient pump, and I could see the linkages in terms of the physical principles. Made the introductions. 18 months down the line, they were developing this thing, and it was then sold to a multinational for tens of millions of pounds. But only because I knew those linkages, because I'd spoken to people in the past and sort of had them in my back pocket, if you like. So that's quite a transactional thing. But another example, I was asked at very short notice by Department for International Trade to host a mission from Brazil. Somebody had actually forgotten that this party of Brazilians was coming over to the UK, literally forgotten, until they were 3 weeks out and they were asking for visas. And at 3 weeks' notice, I was able to put together a program of activity for a whole week, taking them up to the north of Scotland, across to Liverpool, down to London, introduce them to people at Oxford University, purely based on my network and favours that I could call in, people who I thought might be interested.
Perfect. So you're our go-to. If we're having a terrible time and we don't know who to go to, Jonathan is your man. So what I encourage you all to do is to connect with him right now on LinkedIn and send him your requests. Like, this is what I'm looking for. Sarah, what about yourself?
So I'm going to sound a bit like a hippie here, and I'm going to go a bit spiritual. So I really believe in, somebody said to me once, there's no harm in asking the universe for what you want. And I apply that, I think, sometimes to networking. There's this great thing that sometimes if you go out to your network or your community and you say, this is what I'm trying to achieve, this is my goal, and this is how I'm trying to do it, it is incredible where people come from suddenly to support you and help you in your mission. And I think that's one of the first things. I think the second thing is just about creating a curious mindset. And I think as adults, it's something that we lose a little bit. And I try and, well, my team always. Mindset, and that is.
Cool. Oh. So I think we just lost you for a second. Got to my team mindset and then it fell through. But this is, again, just the realities of being online. So it's good. It just adds to what we're trying to do, actually. So if you just want to repeat your sentiment, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so my team often, they're not very surprised when I come into the office the next day, for example, and I say to them, I've met this person on the bus on the way here, and actually whilst chatting to them I found out that they're an investor and they're really interested in our business, and they're all like, you met them on the bus, you know. So it's this kind of idea of having a really curious mindset when you're approaching people. And I'm always massively interested in meeting new people and the chit chat. And I think it's really important not to underestimate the power of small talk and just getting to know people, being curious about them, and going into things with this completely open expectation of what this person, how you can assist them, how you can work with them, and asking them for ways that you can support them. So I would say that's one of the key things for me, certainly in the way that I've approached networking. You did ask for an example of when networking has gone really wrong. And one of the things that utterly destroyed my confidence is when, and I think you're going to talk in a bit about imposter syndrome, is I went to an event many, many years ago, and I was one of the only women there, and I was sitting on a table. It was a round table dinner, my idea of utter hell. And I was sat on this table, and one of the chaps on the table said, he's a politician, and pointed to the guy across the table. And I said, is he? And he said, well, you mean you don't know who this person is? And everybody in the table went very quiet. And I was like, I don't know who this person is. And he said out loud at the table, why do I always get sat next to the stupid people? And there was this like deafening silence around the table. And I remember quite literally wanting the ground to just open up and swallow me up and disappear. Now I wish now in these days, I think I would turn around and just say, that's not a very kind thing to say. And actually you're the person that should be really embarrassed by that. That destroyed my confidence for so long afterwards that I wouldn't go to any roundtable events. I wouldn't go to any events where I would be sat next to people that I didn't know. So I think there's a time when networking can not work in your favor, and it's about how you build that resilience and self-confidence in your right to be there and right to be in the room, which I think is critically important when approaching networking with strangers, which is a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, and we've had a question come up that we are going to answer, but I just want to echo your last point. You know, sometimes it is about how do you find the sense of self to think, actually, I deserve to be in this room. I'm meant to be here. And I don't know everything. I'm here to learn. And when you shift that mindset and you are surrounded by other people who think similarly, you know, just to echo what you've said, you are able to really transform and take things forward. We are going to go into rejection stories. And if anybody has any more, I think it's really important to show the failures as much as it is the positives, purely because it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Like, networking is difficult. And it, you know, just before actually COVID, in February, I was sitting in the mayor's office because I really want to work with government and local councils. So I finally had an in. I was like, right, this is my networking opportunity. So I was waiting for my meeting, the lady who I was meeting to attend, and I was sitting in the canteen table, and I had a really good conversation with a local council leader in one of the London boroughs. I thought it was really good. Like we were vibing. We were talking about like education and the school system, and I was like, right, do you know what, great opportunity. So I ended it with, hey, do you mind if we connect on LinkedIn? And she was like, no. I was like, what? She's like, I don't really think we have anything to offer each other, so I really don't want to connect with you. And I think that's the first time that someone, possibly to my face, was like, I'm not going to connect with you on LinkedIn. And it really struck a nerve, not because it was rejected, but because I had to think back to myself and think, did I say something wrong? Like, did I perceive this conversation in a way that I thought was going really well, but actually she didn't want to? And why did someone say no? But the point being that as much as we are in favor of networking, it's equally as important to remember that not everybody wants to connect. And that's completely fine. All we can do is ask with a reason, with a clear intention. You know, maybe we can network to support on this. Maybe we can keep in touch. Maybe it's directed to our future principles, but we have to especially allow the other person to say, actually, maybe it's not just for me. That's cool. Someone else will come. And it will improve. I mean, even my LinkedIn connections, actually, I've gone from 2,000 at the beginning of the year to 12,000 today. Just in the few months, because you've arranged yourself around the industry and the purpose that you want to live. And there's that saying that you are the sum of the 5 people around you. Actually, to some extent, I believe that. If you're around toxic people, if you surround yourself around those that aren't open, not curious, you know, not kind of shifting their mindset, the opportunities aren't going to open for you, and nor are you going to be open-minded when opening these conversations and taking them forward. So I do want to go into times where you've taken it wrong and really touch on imposter syndrome. But I'm very mindful that we're talking about networking, but we haven't actually told people where to connect with us. We're kind of midway through and we haven't shared any of our social handles or our LinkedIn URLs for those who are watching. So of course, our names are on the screen. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Sonia Barlow, and throughout my social handles are at Sonia Barlow UK, Instagram, Twitter. I now even joined TikToks, that's at Sonia Barlow. So there I am. Alicia, what about yourself? What are your handles and kind of, you know, where can people connect with you before we go back to the questions?
So I have abandoned social media. So you're very much likely to come across my social media with a very nice lock key next to it. However, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, just my name, Alicia Essen. I do have company Twitter, next steps _UK. And I do have a Twitter, just send a request. It's at LEI_AMOY, Leamoy.
Thank you so much. And we'll get into why you've abandoned social media in a bit as well. Jonathan, what about yourself? What are some of your socials and how can they connect with you?
Well, I'm easily found on LinkedIn because there's only one of me with my name. So I think I'm just Jonathan Abra. Twitter, Abra_Jonathan. If you go for Jonathan Abra, you'll get me ranting about politics and sport and nonsense. So Abra_Jonathan is the one to go for. But I just wanted very quickly to echo a point that Sarah made and say that some of my best networking has been in really informal circumstances. So train journeys are great. I always try to sit on a table seat because then you've got 3 people to potentially network with. And I ended up on the board of a really prestigious research program on the basis of a conversation that I had on a train down to London. And being on that board was some of the best opportunities that I've had to connect with really high flying people in the sector that I'm in, and has opened subsequent doors. So yeah, don't waste those opportunities. Don't just dive into your phone, talk to the people on trains.
Yeah, thank you. We've had a great comment from the audience as well, saying I've met some of my best connections when I least expecting it, including whilst I was manning the primary school's Christmas tombola stall, right? That's another one. For anyone who's wondering, how do you meet people? Genuinely, bus stops, trains, Pret subscription, great way to meet people. Jumping on random webinars online, and actually just doing a request to say, I'm open for a virtual coffee, who is available, and this is what I want to talk about. And Sarah, coming to yourself, how can those who are watching right now connect with you, on which social channel, and how can they find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at which is at Scholes Porter, so at SCOLES Porter. That's my married name, and I'm a bit of a Twitter ranter. So yeah, so I'm active on there. I also have my Inspired Minds and various other channels on there, but you can link into those from my profile. I'm on LinkedIn as Sarah Porter, founder, CEO, Inspired Minds, and I'm on Instagram as female founder.
Awesome, thank you. And for those who are listening and still with us, if you go on the KTN UK Twitter handle, you can see everyone's Twitter social handles actually tagged in the most recent posts, just in case you haven't picked up anyone's name and you want to go through. So before we jump into the imposter syndrome type of side of things, we've had a couple of questions come up that I really want to just jump right into. And they're very much related to what we've said. So there's two parts to this question. I'll let you all kind of have the floor. One, during COVID-19, where have you gone to network? And the question that came up from the audience is, when going up to strangers at a networking event, any advice on killer opening lines? So because we are all virtual and probably going to be virtual for a while now, I guess during COVID-19, where have you networked? And if it's been online, how do you start that conversation through something like a chat forum? Or kind of, a conversation like we're having now. So Sarah, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, sure. So I think I mentioned it before. I'm a big believer in small talk. And I have children. I have 3 children, and children are brilliant at teaching you the skills of small talk, and they really are. And the approach of being really curious with people. There's a film actually called Kung Fu Panda. And the panda in it at one point says, all I hear is chit, 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 chat, chitty, chitty, chit, chat. And that's one of his sayings. And I'm a big believer in just chit chat. You shouldn't overthink these things too much. Human beings are human beings, and human nature is quite often to resonate with people who are just authentic, kind, in the law of kind of human behaviors, to smile actually immediately puts the people that you're talking to at ease. And it sounds really obvious, but it really does. There's a great book on this called The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene that I would really recommend that people read, which talks very much about the power of micro expressions in human nature, and how just simply by being approachable and genuine, authentic, and smiling and looking people in the eye, you automatically put other people at ease. And I think that's really important when you're approaching people that's a complete stranger. And also, some of the most charming people are great at small talk. They're people that are able to resonate with other people with the power of emotion. And I think if you can, I'm a really kind of, one of my habits really is to poke fun of myself quite a lot. I'm quite often say to people, oh, do you know what, I just came out of the toilet and realized that I actually have my skirt tucked in my pants, or whatever it is. And sometimes it's these sorts of things that just people at ease. We're humans, we're all humans. Just be kind to each other and just be a little bit genuine. So that's how I would approach people, certainly in person. And I think online, it's there's a really interesting theory actually, and I think it was Ryan Holiday who says it, which is, if you always read the same books as everybody else, you'll only think what everybody else is thinking. It's something that's much more kind of succinct than that. But I actually believe that your network and your community and your tribe should be an interdisciplinary group of people that you wouldn't ordinarily chat with down the pub. Some of the people that are really interesting that I follow on Twitter have a completely juxtaposed opinion on matters to myself, but I follow them and I'm really interested in what their argument is. Why do they say that, and where are they coming from? And I do think that your community and your network should include people that have differing opinions than yourself and maybe from completely different backgrounds. So I don't know if that answers that question.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I've just taken a note of your resources for those who are listening. 1 is to watch Kung Fu Panda. 2 is the Robert Greene book. And 3 is though you've echoed those small talk, I love what you've just said. You know, networking could be as simple as following those online that aren't necessarily even in your industry or related to what you are doing. They're different, but it enables you to learn and to stay progressive. So thank you so much for sharing. Jonathan, what about yourself?
Killer opening lines is a tricky one, yeah, especially for somebody who finds it not second nature. I have on occasion made a remark such as "great tie" or "I love your glasses," just a innocuous icebreaker, if you like. Doesn't always go according to plan. You know, some people will sort of shrug and look at you as if you're mad and turn their back, but I suppose you're not going to, you know, every frog's not going to turn into a prince.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. You know, small, short lines, ice-breaking, and we're going to come into your kind of preparing yourself as a networker, as an introvert right after as well, because I think all three of you have that very much in common. And whereas I'm probably on the other side is you can't shut me up. So that's my problem. Alicia, what about yourself?
So I think there were two questions. So one was around networking COVID times and the other was around align. So the thing I've learned about networking, answering the second question, for me personally is, and this is something, I can't quote it verbatim because I don't remember it verbatim, but it's something from a coach called David McQueen, and he often talks about being your authentic self in situations, in rooms, and I think that's really important. So for me, I don't really have any lines to give anyone. I don't have the memory to carry lines, but I do approach, I do try now to approach people as authentic as possible, and if I'm not for them, I'm not for them, I think, and I think that's just the way I have to, for me personally, that's just the way I have to carry on. And then in terms of meeting people during COVID, at the start of COVID, I started to go to a lot of events online. I went to the Women in AI, which is the first place I ever met Siobhan. I went to various networking events, and through those, I met some people. Some people expressed interest in areas that I knew about and could connect them, so I did that. But also what I realized was, in fact, and it's funny because I'm watching a TED talk that referenced this. What I started to do towards the end was actually, I started to sort of foster the relationships that I already had, but not really built on, people I had known in passing, but not really have spent the time to get to know. And so that's what I've been doing for the last few months. And through that, I've built some absolutely amazing relationship with people, and people I know that would have my back throughout anything. And I think that's really important, to always understand what your existing network looks like, and to try and foster that. Yes, it's good to get outside of your circle, but also understand who you have in your circle.
Yeah, thank you so much. You've raised such a crucial point. And there's 2 points you've raised there. Is one, being your authentic self and being okay if the networking opportunity or the person you're talking to doesn't really align with what you're about, and knowing that. But the only way you're going to know that is by really having that conversation. And the second thing, and again, we're breaking those barriers or those necessarily those connotations that come with networking. When we think networking, we think building new relationships. But actually, you've raised such a good point to say, why are you going out to build new relationships if you haven't fostered or actually built relationships with the people that you've met already? You know, COVID-19 is a great time, even now, to check back in, to drop someone an email to say, look, you know, I just want to check in. How are you doing? How's the workplace? I think that's how Siobhan and myself got back in touch. You know, how has it been for you? Are you okay? The holidays are coming up. Should we arrange a virtual coffee in the new year? And have those kind of conversations. The one thing I really want to pick up on is that introvert versus extrovert dynamic that we definitely have going on. So myself, as an extrovert, I tend to think out loud, and I'm not the most prepared. I'm more of a, let's just go for it. And kind of, you know, I'll think about it afterwards. So what I've had to now naturally start doing is preparing the conversation. So before I approach a networking opportunity, it's what do I want out of this and what can I give someone else? Definitely when I'm sending messages. So I say, you know, I reference a line, kind of slide into someone's DMs, and DMs is direct messages. I've done that on Instagram, I've done it in Twitter, I've done it on LinkedIn. But when I've done it, it's with a clear objective. So my second tip is always have a call to action. You know, is it you're inspired, or I am inspired in your progression, I want to learn more. Do you have 15 minutes for a phone call? Is it let me just follow you because I want to learn more? And the third thing is also when you are extroverted, it's a lot of energy that you're putting out. Take time just to reflect and recharge. And, you know, commenting on what Alicia's kind of mentioned already, foster the relationships you already have. As someone who has a personality or is you know, slightly more of a kind of outgoing personality, I like to get to know different people. But what I'm not great at, therefore, is fostering those relationships that already exist, and that's really key. So my question is, in one kind of, you know, twofold, is when you say you're an introvert, I don't want to talk about necessarily where the downfalls are, but what are your skills and strengths when it comes to networking? Because actually introverts have a lot of skills and strengths as well. Preparation, time management, just reflection. That's awesome. And the second question, and twofold to that, is how do you prepare yourself before you go into a networking opportunity, even something like this? You know, like we didn't meet until 15 minutes before the session, and now we're having a conversation, and that's just the reality of Zoom right now. How do you prepare yourself? And so what are some really actionable tips that someone can take forward? Jonathan, I'm going to bring it to you. Also, you know, please do reference the fact that you are a minority in this. And so we raised that at the beginning for a reason, is because you raised it before we started the session. But it means that sometimes you may feel slightly uncomfortable. What do you do in that situation?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Yeah, imposter syndrome is tied up with the introvert thing, I think, because not necessarily, but sometimes the two are linked. There's you know, you don't feel perhaps a high sense of self-worth, and it can be self-perpetuating. However, I think COVID has been fantastic for shy people. So networking online doesn't demand the output of time or travel or expense, but it also enables you to be in a room legitimately. So you're on screen with everybody because you have to be. So you're occupying the same space, and it gives you the opportunity to listen, and you don't necessarily have to contribute, but the opportunity is there to do so. You know, body image is removed to a certain extent because you might just be a talking head. All manner of barriers have come down through online networking, and you know, some of my contacts I've never met in person. We have only ever communicated via a screen or email, and yet we transact business. So I don't think it's necessarily been a bad thing. Yes, I'm feeling slightly out of my depth today here. I am a white, able-bodied, beardy male among a room of women. But equally, a couple of years ago, I was asked to step in for a colleague at the opening of the Lancaster University Quantum Research Centre, and I didn't even know what quantum research was. But I went along and I gave the talk and I mingled. And last month I was able to broker some business on behalf of a spin-out company from the Lancaster University Quantum Research Centre based on connections that I made that day. So I would say take all your opportunities, as long as they don't detract from something else. You know, jump in. If necessary, just hang around and listen. But you know, take those opportunities over the lunch table, the coffee break, just to talk to people, chitty chat, or whatever it was that Kung Fu Panda said.
Awesome, thank you so much. Sarah, what about yourself?
So I am a massive introvert, as we talked about before, and some of the coping mechanisms that I've used, include anchor points. So researching in quite a great deal beforehand the situation that I'm going into and feeling that I'm very well prepared, and then that automatically gives me self-confidence. And anchoring for me is quite literally using 1 or 2 or 3 statements that I have learned off by heart, be it an interesting quote or something that's of relevance to a conversation or a network that I'm going into. So that's one of my go-to coping mechanisms, because I always think, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is that I can't think of anything interesting to say, and then I'm going to look like an idiot, right? And that's, in my mind, that's the circle of conversation that goes on. So I think, okay, so therefore I'm going to learn a couple of things, and these are my go-to fallbacks. If all else goes wrong, this is what I'm going to fall back on. So I think that's one thing. Another thing is, I think it's in the book about Brené Brown, Daring Greatly, where she talks about embracing your awkward. You know, and sometimes it is perfectly okay to be a bit different, be socially inept, and be actually a little bit awkward and a bit different. And you know what? Just embrace it. You know, sometimes we're not all the same, and I think that's what makes life really interesting. And if your way of communicating with people is that you're softly spoken, or you're not necessarily a joker, you're quite a stoic or a serious person, whatever it is, embrace it. That's you. Be authentic, be yourself, I think, as Alicia said beforehand, and embrace your awkwardness, because I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. And then I think the third thing is just around being an introvert. There is a skill set that comes with being an introvert, and there's a really good book about on the power of introverts, which is about the fact that introverts by nature are actually really good listeners. And introverts are very good at listening to other people, and people love to be heard. And I think that's one of the key things with networking. People love you to tell their story. And if you can ask the right open-ended questions that unearth people's ability to talk to you, and as an introvert, you then sit back and listen, power to you, because all you've got to do is listen and comment. And that's something that I think introverts are naturally very, very good at.
Thank you so much. I'm just writing down this keynote so we can summarize at the end. We've had actually a comment come through from the audience directed to Jonathan. Jonathan, you're doing a great job. That is the comment. And the person who sent it through says, I find, quote, "Hello, do you mind if I join you?" unquote, works pretty well. Something simple and plain and to the point. I do believe that we tend to overcomplicate networking, so it's great to see that we're bringing the simplicity back into it. Alicia, it would be great to kind of hear your thoughts on this too.
Oh, I love Sarah's quote from Brené Brown, which is "embrace your awkward." And I think during these COVID times, I have been embracing my awkward and also embracing my introverts. And I do tell people now that I'm just an introvert. Whatever you think of me, it takes me a long time to prepare for this. And I feel I've also met my fellow awkward sisters. So I think that's really great as well. I think when you go to events, as a Black female, you're often all the time underestimated. People, they look at you, they wonder why you're here. They may or may not start conversations with people. What I often find is when I'm in those situations and people start to get to talk to you, they suddenly find out how interesting you are, or how suddenly you have value, and therefore they want to talk to you, and then other people will come because all of a sudden there's an amazing conversation happening over there. And I'm definitely that person at networking events that used to attach herself to one person because I felt so awkward in like meeting other people. But for those people who allow themselves to be attached to others, well, thank you very much. But I think the only way to overcome the feeling of being an imposter, especially when, like me as well, when you're an introvert, I think sometimes you just have to, I'm not going to say fake it to make it, but sometimes you really have to just adapt the mindset of, you know what, I'm here and I know what I'm talking about. I know why I'm here and that I have something to give, and just go into the room with that mindset. I'm learning that a lot more now, especially from a colleague of mine, Sabrina. I just think just embrace yourself. Whoever you are, somebody will be attracted to it.
Yeah, I love that. There's a few points I'm just going to summarize because they've been great. Take all your opportunities, foster relationships, stay curious, anchor your points, prepare, have a clear call to action, be authentic and embrace your awkward, adapt your mindset, and most importantly, believe in yourself and know that you have a voice and something to contribute to every conversation. Even if it's not directly in your industry, in your skill set, there is always something to say. We have about 5 minutes left. I'm very mindful of time, but I want to invite our audience to send through questions and make sure we can get them answered. We do have a question through, so that's awesome. The question goes, any tips for branching out of your network into things like startup companies when your experience is wholly academia? I'm going to direct this to Jonathan, and we're going to invite you all to share questions, so please do. And we really want to make it as interactive as possible. You are muted, Jonathan, so if you just want to unmute yourself.
Not sure how that happens. Thank you for pointing it out. I would say this, wouldn't I? But get yourself along to some KTN events. And if you can't get to the events, then contact whoever is closest to you in terms of technical background at KTN, and just look on our website. You'll find the right person. It's what we exist to do. It's about connecting academia, end users of technology, technology developers. And we have those ready-made networks that we can key you into. So whoever it is asked the question, please do reach out. If you can't find the right person, speak to me, because I will connect you to the right person in KTN, and we'll take it from there.
Now I'm on mute. Thank you so much. Alicia, Sarah, do you have anything to add?
I would add that as a startup myself, we are constantly looking for talent. So if you are a PhD student out there, I would say get yourself to events in areas that you're interested in. Check out accelerators and incubators that are having events and what startups they have. And don't be afraid to approach the startup founders. Don't think that just because they're a startup founder or whatever that, don't underestimate yourself. We are constantly looking for good talent, and if you're going to take in the agency to reach out to us, there's no reason why we shouldn't be having conversations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I'd also say LinkedIn is quite good for this. There's some really cool groups on LinkedIn, startup groups, which I'm a member of some of them, and the discussions are just really interesting, particularly ones if you're trying to raise money or funds, or you want to learn from other entrepreneurs. That's really quite cool. Book clubs are quite good. There's quite a few good book clubs now, particularly virtual ones online, that follow great authors or startup books, which is a good way to hear from other people and like-minded people. Look for mentors. So I'd say mentors on startups. So I follow. It's my industry is a very tech bro industry. I'm a CEO and a founder in tech. So, and a lot of the people that I follow are guys. So I purposely seek out and go into Twitter and search for female founders or female founders of startups and follow them and just comment on some of their stuff and get involved in the conversation with them. And the great thing about that, I think, as you pointed out, Jonathan, is the power of social media is brilliant for introverts, because effectively you're not there in the room, so you're kind of behind your computer. I'm not saying become a keyboard warrior, but it is it's great to be able to do that without putting yourself into a situation where you feel awkward.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm just going to summarize those points once again, just because we have so much information. I want to make sure we take away the key points. So one of the things that has been mentioned is research the people that you want to connect with and know exactly why you are connecting with them. Make sure that's evident in the message or the comment or the comms that you're sharing. And the one thing I'd like to add that hasn't already been mentioned is, if you have sent someone a message and they haven't replied, please don't take that as a rejection. Just take that as their inbox is maybe really busy or it's gone into spam, and try again. I always use a rule of 3. I don't mean 3 emails after one another. I mean, kind of take them, within a space of maybe a couple of weeks or maybe a few months, but just check in. The first email may have gone into spam, or they may have not received it. The second email they may be looking at. The third time they're like, do you know what? We actually have time on our calendar. We're going to make this happen. We have an intern who messaged us 3 times. The first 2 times I went to spam. The third time it fell through. Now she's an intern. And to Sarah's point, mentorship is not just for you, but for a young professional. Mentoring doesn't have to be formal or informal. It can be just being a part of a program or seeking advice from someone that you're inspired by. And actually, KTN is sponsoring the LMF mentorship in 2021. So if you are looking to become a mentor or mentee, if you follow me on socials or the LMF network at LMF network or at KTN UK and drop us a message, we can definitely share that with you. So we have a few minutes left. I'm going to start wrapping it up. So I would like to ask you all two final things. One is, what is your top networking tip? Your top networking tip. And the second thing is, if you could go back in time, and I'm only talking about to beginning of the year, right? Not like when you're 16 or something. Beginning of the year, what would you wish your younger self, your, start of 2020 self would have known? That same sentiment you're going to carry through to 2021. So, for example, for me, it's very much, don't be afraid to send that message. What's the worst that can happen? Absolutely nothing, and you won't get a reply, and then you try again. But the worst thing is that you won't get a reply. That's absolutely the worst thing that can happen. Alicia, I'm going to start with yourself. So the first is your top networking tip. And the second, to wrap things up, is what would you tell your kind of January 2020 self?
So on your point about sending emails 3 times, I've had a story, I can't remember who told me the story of somebody trying to network with somebody and they're sending an email 12 times before getting a response. So that's what I want to say. Do not take a written, and I'm notorious for just being bad at message emails. Do not take it as rejection or something on your person. Sometimes people are busy, sometimes communicating is just hard for them, but just continue to reach out and find a way to penetrate that. What was the second one? So the second one was my tip.
Yeah, so your advice to your younger self.
My 2020 pre-COVID self.
Yeah.
I think I really did underestimate the power of networking, and for a time I really thought it was a useless, a waste of time. And I think that I've learned that is actually the exact opposite. But what you have to be careful of is making sure that you're doing the right sort of networking in a really intentional and authentic way.
Thank you so much. Jonathan, yourself?
Unmute. Yeah, so top tip, be unapologetically yourself. Couple of little examples and plugs, I guess. So 2 people that I networked with recently, one was Alison Wood, and Alison was a fairly young graduate from Edinburgh who started up a company called Lily Pads. This is reusable sanitary pads. And she was in a room full of water and wastewater engineers, and they all look like me, and there she was, and she told us all about sanitary towels and menstrual problems in the third world, and I thought that took enormous courage, but she got huge amounts of respect, and there were a lot of people in that room that had daughters that had much more open views than perhaps they would have expected, and she's got investment and she's doing really well. And similarly, there's a great little company called Fab Little Bags. Encourage you to look those up. And Martha Silcott, who started that company, is one of the best networkers I know. And she just is out there to evangelize about making menstruation less embarrassing and less of a stigma. So, they don't hide behind things. They don't use weasel words. They are unapologetically themselves. And I guess my tip to myself at the start of the year would have been along the same line. So I've done young innovators events, and I've done this, and actually people seem to value my input, even though I don't. And I'm sort of realizing that maybe I do have something to say outside my narrow little technical niche.
Thank you so much. And Sarah, I'd like you to end the session. You've already shared such wisdom with us. And, you know, just in case YouTube kicks us off, I want to thank everyone who's listening, who's still with us, and encourage you all to network and connect with us and the KTN network online. So Sarah, I'll leave it to you.
So my top tip would be to go out and get yourself a copy of a book called I'm Okay, You're Okay, which is by Thomas Harris. And that book is all about transactional analysis. And what it does is it teaches you that it is a level playing field out there. And you should go out and approach people as if you are just as worthy as them. You are just as legitimate as them. You are you belong in that room with them. And there's no hierarchy to the way that you communicate with people. You know, that somebody might be the CEO of a business or somebody might be a student. I'm okay, you're okay teaches you to network on a level playing field. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing I would just say as a top tip to myself is I used to be really formal in my approach to people and feel that I had to be formal and corporate. I'd say chuck that out and just be natural with people, and actually summarize the way that you communicate with people as if you were talking to them directly. So if you're sending them an email or an introduction, do it in a way that is just naturally how you speak. Was that quick enough?
Thank you so much. Amazing tips, such great energy. For those listening, for those still involved, connect with us. But most importantly, what I challenge you all to do is to connect with one new person and network with one new person before the holiday period starts. What I mean is a virtual coffee, a phone call, you know, at least 5-10 minutes of a conversation, and tweet us and tell us how our tips have helped you. If you've been able to make a transformation, and most importantly, share your successful networking stories. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with the KTN network and we're going to collate them and we're going to share them out into the public just to prove that it really is all about shifting your mindset, believing that you have something to say, and most importantly, not being afraid to be yourself and sharing your personal narrative. Thank you again for having me and for having all of us.
Thank you so much, Sonia. It was a fantastic webinar, and I'd also like to thank our panelists, so Alicia, Jonathan and Sarah, for sharing your thoughts and experiences. If you want to connect with me, you can on Twitter at Shuan_Smith or Shuan Smith on LinkedIn. It's a very unusual name, so you should be able to find me. I'd like to thank everyone that's joined us online today. Next, let's talk about webinars taking place on the 13th of January. Delith Edwards from SCFC will be joined by some more fantastic panelists to talk about finding the space that's right for you. So we hope you can join us then. And also look out for our next coffee and networking event, which will be held in January as well, if you want to actually put your networking skills to practice and find and network with some more incredible women from our Women in Innovation network. If you like to keep up to date with all the Women in Innovation news and events, please do sign up for our newsletter, visit our program page, or join the LinkedIn group. And once again, I'd like to express a massive thank you to Sonia Barlow for hosting the wonderful session today, our incredible panelists, and to you all for joining us. So we hope to see you again next time. Goodbye.